All right, we good to go?
You're good to go.
All right, I'm going to call to order the Information Systems Committee meeting at 5:31 p.m. Our item on the agenda today was the Quality IP proposal. We have asked Gary Bishop to join us to touch base on that proposal and to give us some feedback. Gary, thank you so much for joining. We appreciate any feedback you can provide to council on this. So if you want to go ahead.
What feedback are you looking for at this point?
So just, we aren't IT gurus, and we have this proposal from Quality IP, just your feedback on the proposal, your thoughts in comparison, to what else is out there possibly, just your feedback on that. And then if anybody has any questions for you on that proposal, there might be some questions from council.
Yeah, when Brian asked me to take a look at it, Ryan needed to put together a comparison for you guys, his cost versus what was available outside, available from a state agreement, state term schedules. And I thought he had done a very good job of picking what was available on, thought he'd done a good job of what was available through the state term schedules and prearranged pricing through this that were on the state term schedules available to purchase, comparing his services and offerings out there against what was available. That said, it's hard to compare that to what else is out there. At the time, I mean, it appeared to be fair market rate. IT services range anywhere from $125 an hour to $250 an hour, depending on the level of technician, what you're getting, the services they're providing. When you start to compare hourly rates for those kinds of professional services, you're splitting hairs. You may be bringing in a Cisco certified engineer versus a Cisco certified architect. You might be bringing in a phone service specialist, network specialist, application specialist. It all depends. That's why Ryan had worked himself into a schedule that looked like it was a very fair comparison to the services he offered against other ones that were negotiated on the state term schedules.
So Gary, can you just talk through a city our size, if this is, in your opinion, a decent price? I think we've heard some conversation from council in terms of the increase that we're seeing, with some of the improvements that Quality IP has done since they've come on board. Can you speak to those? It
is fair in terms of services. You're trading on staff personnel, payroll, benefits, and that for a services company. There's a little bit in there. You have to, maybe the one thing that didn't get done in that proposal, and I don't know that would be good, would be to separate your licensing costs out from the services. So it's purely a services estimate. Then you'd be able to look at the man hours and the service cost versus what you're paying for licensing, like your Office 365, things like that. You're paying for that already. You're going to have that cost whether you purchase it through Quality IP or you purchase it elsewhere. So what you really boil down to is you're looking at that hourly cost and the service that you're getting for that money. The hours, you guys should have a good feel for the hours that it takes for them to provide you service at this point. I think they've been on with you for 2 years, I believe, a little over 2 years. So you should have a good feel where they're at and working with them on that proposal. They should have a good feel for what's required to take care of an organization your size. It's not just fixing PCs. It's not just running over and putting a new hard drive in or replacing a monitor. There's a lot of other things that go on. The server support, the back-end support, security, everything else that goes on with that is kind of baked in there. I think Brian recognizes that when I throw some things on his desk as well.
Yeah, I think right now, personally, us changing would be kind of, I don't think it would be a good move. I think, it's taken 2 years to get where we are. And, and I do think if we would start over with another company, they're going to have to get used to us. It's going to be like starting over again. So I think for us to continue to move forward, my thing is to stay with where we are, with quality IP.
You're not buying, probably the wrong analogy, but you're not buying a new fire hydrant.
Right. We know
You can
what
order
we,
different fire hydrants from different manufacturers, but they all have the same connection for the fire department. There's a body of knowledge that Quality IP, you have paid them to acquire, unfortunately. They keep that body of knowledge. They share it with you. It's not unavailable to you, but a new company coming in, you're either going to have to pay them both together and share that knowledge amongst both companies to transition, or you're going to have to start from ground zero again. I'm not saying that another company can't pick up and go, but they're not going to know your nuances that Quality IP would know after 2 years.
And for me, in talking with a lot of the departments, and they are doing a good job. The concern that I had, and I addressed this with Brian, was just that the whole bid thing, the whole bid process, that we again did not do that for this. And so I think it's more of that piece, not that they're not doing a good job, or they are doing a good job, but do we have to bid this out?
Yeah, and I don't know your internal policies,
Yeah,
unfortunately, so I can't really speak to it. I mean, it's hard. Not saying it can't be done.
Yeah.
It can be done, and proposals can be sought. Unfortunately, the RFP process of generating the RFP, advertising, opening it, just delays you farther beyond where you're at now.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could jump in real quick, Christina, to answer your question, talking
Yes.
with the law director, my understanding is that for a service contract, we do not have to go out to bid for this.
Great.
So, yeah. And I know
That's-
that Brian, I know the administration's position is that they would like this Quality IP contract moved on and approved. Is there anything else on your end that needs filled in, or, and Rob, you're muted, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I wanted to ask when the actual committee members would be allowed to speak, because everyone else seems to be speaking. Just so my position is clear, I don't know whether we need to or should go out to bid according to state standards. I just know, and even though the law director, you said, Andrew, doesn't think we should, we have to, I know he says we should, because we're not doing our due diligence. We haven't. Just so people understand the history, we had a long-standing full-time IT director who left fairly abruptly, but we did have time to do a search. We did a search, we picked somebody, and on the day they were going to start, he backed out. So we scrambled to put together IT services with Quality IP with no consideration to anybody else. We've never engaged any other options other than Quality IP, and I just think that's an abandonment of our responsibilities. Now, I don't know that we need to do any kind of formal RFP, but I do think we should try to engage other companies that provide the same service. They can come in. We could have a modified RFP, which is some basic questions that we could ask them about the types of support they could give the city and how much they might cost. We can invite them to the city to look at our operations, and maybe nobody will take us up on that offer. And maybe some will, and Quality IP will be the best option at the end of the process. But I think that's what we're supposed to do. Well, not just to go with the same guy who brought us to the dance. I mean, we gotta kind of look at other options. And unfortunately, that's what we decided a year ago, and then nobody did anything. And so now we're here at the 11th hour again, scrambling to say, and then the obvious idea is, well, let's just go with Quality IP, Well, I just think that's irresponsible. And
I think one of the holdups, Rob, was, and we did, I know I made some phone calls because I was familiar with a couple IT places in this area. The issue we had was finding someone that was LEED certified and plus was able to handle the phone system as well. So, I mean, not that I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but that was a difficult thing to find as far as in an IT organization.
I don't know where you looked, so I can't address that.
I had called, there was a place that I'm familiar with and then another place, and neither of them were LEED certified, just to kind of get an idea of.
Well, I mean, but look, I don't want to get into a debate, but my son-in-law works for a similar company. He changed. He doesn't work for the same company, and they were LEED certified and would have been happy to bid. I actually talked to one of the guys who does the sales, and he would love to have been able to compete for our business. So there are companies out there, and again, I don't know that they're better in quality IP. I just know that we haven't done that due diligence, which I think is our responsibility, and that's just my opinion.
Mhm.
And I've never said, just for the record, I've never said we had to go out to bid. I've questioned, and I still haven't gotten a great answer. According to Andrew, this is the first I've heard that the law director says we don't have to. I know we should have gone out to the bid for that phone system, and we didn't. And I just worry that sometimes we're not playing by the rules. So, but to be clear, I'm not saying we have to go out to bid. I think we should provide a competitive process. That's all.
Paul, do you have anything that you wanted to ask or add?
Even though I know very little about this area of IT, there's just a little bit that I was considering. And this is just a little bit of Rob's comments. And this is just what was going through my mind. Some of his comments, I was thinking that I think sometimes it might be a good idea to, you look at other companies and not just looking at them, only because the way I'm looking at it is being representatives of the residents of this city. And that way, I mean, I haven't heard this from any residents, but I'm just thinking what they might think is is this the premium company out there? Did anyone look at any other companies as a comparison to see what any others might have to offer as a, not just price wise, but you can, as an example, you can go buy a car or truck, but they're not all identical until you compare. It's just a comparison, but that's my thoughts on what very little I know about this area. But I was just thinking of sometimes residents, when they hear things, they might question things. And the reason I'm saying this, another word that comes to my mind is stewardship. I'm not going to give a speech about this or anything, but that's something that just came to my mind pertaining to this subject. That's all.
Well, my only question then, we have this contract to move on with, or for the committee, is it your suggestion that we go out and get an RFP to get engage other companies? And then I guess the follow-up to Gary would be, how would that process work? I guess I'm asking the committee, but also council, because if this is something that we want, we should be moving on yesterday. Like you're saying, Rob, it's the 11th hour, but I understand where you're coming from on that issue.
I agree with your comments, and it seems like I don't understand why this happens often, but there's some things they're just weighted almost to the tail end. And I
We
believe
knew this was coming. This is coming up. This isn't a shock. I mean, we've known that this is coming.
Yeah.
So
but
we
it was my
paid Gary
understanding,
to do this,
yes.
to look at our stuff. And, you know, Gary, his expertise in this, you know, I think personally, I understand that, you know, that you wanted Rob to look at other areas. But again, I think with the consistency and the headway we've made with our IT and with, you know, how we've gone forward, I think it would be, you know, I don't think you're going to, you might get somebody at maybe a cheaper rate, but you're not going to get the consistency that we have right now. And I think it's important.
How do you know that, Amy? How could you possibly?
Well, because they're familiar with us. They're familiar with us, where if you bring someone else on,
the
what Gary
first
said.
company you go with, you have to stay with forever because they know us. Because nobody else knows us until they engage with us.
But
So,
we haven't
and
had
I'm
any
not saying they're doing
issues.
I'm not saying they're doing a bad job. I just don't understand the mentality that says we can't go anyplace else because they know us. And by the way, that's what I said when we did this, that as soon as we would engage with a company, they would have their hooks into the system. We'd be buying their types of systems according to their expertise, and it would be very hard for us to disengage from them. And this is the exact conversation that's happening right now. And I don't buy the argument that there's not a company that could come in and do the same thing. There's all kinds of companies that provide IT services. They may be the best, but there's no way for anyone of us at this meeting to say that with any certainty without knowing what other companies can provide. I'm sorry, I didn't jump on you like that.
No. I think it's just, so my understanding from all of this has been that it was administration had met a while back. They were comfortable with the services from Quality IP, and because it didn't have to go out to bid, administration felt confident and comfortable with moving this forward. Is that a fair statement as far as kind of to summarize this, Andrew?
I'd ask Brian, since he's kind of leading the charge on this, but yeah, I was there for that conversation with Quality IP. Everybody in the room seemed to be comfortable, but that you can be comfortable with your vendor. But in terms of where Rob is coming from, I hear you, Rob. So I don't know. Again, I'm circling back to, yes, we're happy with the quality of work that Quality IP is doing. I understand logistically this is going to be challenging if you want to go out for RFP, but is that something council wants to do? So I'm throwing it back to council as a question, and this committee specifically.
Well, my answer is yes. I'm not saying that it has to be an RFP. I'm saying before we sign a contract with Quality IP, we at least investigate whether there are other companies interested and whether they've provided a similar proposal as Quality IP. Give them access to the city so that they can understand what we do. And then we can make a decision. And I'm certainly not anti-Quality IP. I'm just not in favor of staying in bed with the same company just because we started with them and we've never looked at any alternatives. So my answer is a shortened version of a bidding process. And by the way, that's kind of what we do with the phone system, right? We didn't send out formal approach, but we did have two, and we picked Quality IP because it was the best one. So there's nothing out there to suggest we won't continue with Quality IP.
If we decide to put this back out, Gary, do you have a rough idea of how long this may take us?
Probably by the time you pick a couple vendors, solicit them, bring them in for them to do, a thorough analysis, you're looking better than 30 days. I would hope within 6 weeks. I would hope. I mean, 4 weeks is realistic if everybody crushes everything they need to do and gets done. If not, any salesman can shoot from the hip, and they can shoot you a ballpark number right away. If they're going to have to come in, look at your environment, do a thorough, walkthrough. It's going to be more than a day each. Go back, put their numbers on it. I mean, you could get it in within 30 days.
And we would select the vendors to come in.
I would think that the administration would somehow contact 3 or 4 vendors to
Yeah,
come
if
in.
you're not doing a full RFP, the administration is going to have to reach out to some companies.
Why didn't
themselves
we
to
bring,
solicit quotes.
why didn't we bring this up sooner instead of before the meeting if we thought about bidding out the process, because now isn't this information out there? Their bid is public. So is that going to be fair to Quality IP?
Their bid's going to be available, would be public anyways. And their
Right,
bid
but
last year would have been available.
with their, now with their contract now, I mean, is that anything that,
This
what, you know what I'm saying? Didn't we have that issue before? Because with the last time, I think, was it with the phone system that because we'd already had the contract out there, I remember something, but I can't, there was something that we had already put out there. Maybe it was when we went with Quality IP and, the fairness of it, at the time, I can remember there being question about it. But I just, if this was something that, we thought about doing, I wish we would have done before, the last hour of when this contract comes up.
But it's not a sealed bid process.
No, but nobody's bid should be made public before the rest of the bids are requested or received. I think it's only fair to any of the vendors that nobody's is made public until they're all received. And then it's all public.
I think you're right, Amy. I think it was, I wasn't here at the time, but I think it was the phone system that you're talking about. Because I think they wanted to, I think it was Comdoc maybe that wanted to bid on it, but they wanted the bid from QIP, I think, at the time. So I just remember talking to Kimball about that, and I was in the audience listening to some of that. This is a service contract. It's similar to anything. I mean, it's similar to like how we hire Dennis West, how we have our HR director. We can bid it out at any point. We don't have to. I mean, we made QIP dance through a lot of hoops. They wrote out a lot of reasons why they feel like they should stay, all the accomplishments they've had since 2018, their upcoming goals. Ryan's come on, he's answered all the questions from council. As requested, we brought Gary in to give his opinion. He stated his reasons why he felt we should stay with QIP at the time. But we can bid this, like Gary's saying, we can do this, but that's what's happened. And that's it. You say it's waiting to the 11th hour, but this has been an ongoing discussion the entire year that we've been having, trying to get this to fruition. But up until last week, I didn't know we needed to go to bid for this. And then that's when all this came out.
Well, I think in all fairness too, that we've heard, to Rob's point, that there was going to be an agreement that this would be bid out, or at least talked with other companies. And you're right that the last meeting that we had with Quality IP, everybody seemed happy. And this is now the administration's suggestion of moving this way. So whether we agree with it or not, I think the question's still out there. Are we going to move this on to committee of the whole? I've said in the past that I think Quality IP has done a good job with what they've done. Christina pulled all the tickets for this past year, so there's no shortage of requests that they've followed up on, and they've done certainly all of the upgrades that we've seen. And I understand Cisco seems to be the top priority or top company when you're talking about some of these IT upgrades. So I think that when you're looking at a Cisco network engineer, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm out of my league here, but it just seems to be the standard that anything Cisco. So yes, it's going to be more expensive. There are subscription fees involved with it, but it seems to be that standard across the many municipalities that's what they're going to be purchasing. I think they've given us also some breaks in terms of other things. So they pointed out, not only they've helped us with this streaming that we'll be able to use next month for a regular council meeting, and helped us in that area. And then with the Wi-Fi service, downtown Wi-Fi service, they've identified some cost savings there, potential cost savings. So I'm circling back, and I'm somewhat justifying Quality IP, but I'm circling back with the question. And Paul, I think as the third member, I'm kind of asking whether or not we want to move this on to committee of the whole. And I guess in between now and then, if there's any other questions that we could ask Gary or Brian as kind of the point person for the administration.
I don't have anything else myself.
So Paul and Rob, shall we move this forward? And then just try to get some, go ahead, Rob. You're on mute, I think.
No, I'm
Okay.
not.
Okay.
No, I'm not in favor of moving it forward. I'm in favor of providing a competitive process where Quality IP can submit a proposal along with whatever other companies choose to compete for our services. And by the way, Brian, you mentioned our economic development person, our HR person. Those were competitive processes. So this, I guess my question is, why are we doing something so different? And by the way, I mean, historically, last year, we renewed the Quality IP contract for 1 year for this very reason, so that we could prepare a process, not necessarily a formal bidding process, but a process where we could allow other companies to compete. So this wasn't an 11th hour. This wasn't from last week. It was discussed last year and just never acted on until last week. So,
Right.
you know, and I guess look, city government is complicated. Is it my responsibility? Is it the chair of IT? Is it the administration? Is it the mayor? I don't know. And I guess maybe we should have had a plan a year ago. So I'm not blaming anybody. Don't get me wrong. But I think there's time to do something. And I just hate that feeling I get when we're not doing things right. So that's where I'm at. But look, I'm all for going forward if there's a majority of others that want to move it forward, then I'm just one voice. So, you know, feel free to say and act the way you believe you should. Don't just because I'm saying we should do it one way doesn't mean that that's how it has to be done.
And I have just one other question. Is there been quite a bit of input from supervisors, superintendents from each department?
Input as far as from different administrators, Paul?
Not, well, pertaining to each and every department that's involved. What I'm referring to: street department, wastewater, water treatment, police, fire, water meter, recreation, all of them. I was just wondering what type of input individually have you had, or
Have you talked to him, Paul?
no, I
Have you
haven't.
reached out? Okay, I just wondered. I didn't know if maybe being on that committee, you might have reached out to some of them to ask them that. I have a question too. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Paul. I didn't mean to do that. But what about like Heather and Dennis? I mean, we don't bid their contracts out, do we? We just renewed them, correct?
Well, but there was a process initially. And I think the difference there is they're individuals. You know, I mean, we can't,
Heather's,
you know how I've talked about this. And if you want my opinion, they shouldn't be contract. They should be employees anyway. And we don't change employees at a whim, or we don't have contracts mostly for employees. They're hired in perpetuity. So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess you're right. Maybe we should every so often, since they are contracts. And again, that's the difference between an employee and a contractor. Maybe we should. And I'm all for it if somebody suggests we do that.
Paul, just quickly to answer your question, we met with management with all the different departments a couple months back, and they provided feedback and really didn't have any major issues with Quality IP. And then I surveyed everybody about 2 weeks ago, and that's when I also pulled all the tickets to see how many tickets they ran in a year, or since actually not even a year, it was a half a year, and if there was any open tickets and if there was any issues, and no one shared that there was any issues.
Okay, that's a very nice clarification for myself.
I felt, reaching out myself and just, reaching out myself and asking for that feedback, especially with the tickets, because when people were complaining, I know at one point we did have some trouble with communication and follow up. So I wanted to see if that was still there. And it didn't seem to be. When I ran the tickets, it seemed that that people were responsive. In fact, when I did the ride along with the police department, the police department was very happy with services. And out of all the places that it needs to work, that's one of them, right? So it seemed everything worked flawlessly, and they were having issues when I was there actually with a vehicle, and Quality AP was right there helping them get the internet up and running. So they were out there providing what they needed to do.
Yes, Christine, I want to say thank you because you did reach out also to the fire department with your questions. You've done above and beyond of, going out and, educating yourself. And you did speak with me yourself in regards to what I thought with the contract. So Christina has been doing her homework as a chair. So she was comfortable, I'm comfortable, but I'm not on this committee, I understand. So it's up to the committee to decide what you want to do with this. And so, I think if we're going to start, with contracts though, we better be careful because there's other, people in positions that are here with contracts that we don't do this on.
I don't recall seeing Quality IP's proposal, and maybe I missed it in my email, but what I saw was a bill for June. And if we go to the route of a competitive process, then I don't really want to see their proposal until we see other as well. But I just have the question: was their proposal even sent out?
I'm gonna have to check the emails. Ryan talked about it when their owner was at the committee meeting and answered everybody's
We received
questions.
something from Gary, correct? I remember reading, what his thoughts were over, what he looked at, correct?
Right.
You recall that.
Well, Ryan sent it to everybody and I forwarded it to everybody. Then later at the committee meeting, they asked me to send it to Gary. So I sent it to Gary to look at and he gave his opinion on it.
Yeah, there was an email on June 10th that I'm looking at now from you, Brian, to all of council.
Yeah. And there was.
Show me the proposal that's included there, though.
It was an attachment.
The attachment is a bill for June services. And then there's a price list. I assume that's the state price list.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just saying, I don't think that if they presented a proposal that council has seen it. What I'm looking at is invoice M365, due upon receipt June 1st, and then it says monthly billing for June, but I don't see a proposal. And again, I'm fine with that if the process is to get competing proposals. But at some point we have to see the proposal.
Yes.
So I mean, we're having this meeting, we're talking of the agenda item is a proposal that nobody's seen.
I honestly can't. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was attached before we had the last committee meeting.
Well, that may be true.
And it was a hyperlink from Ryan. Because preceding all Gary's emails, there was some before that were from Ryan when we had him come to the council meeting and ask, let council ask their questions too. And he attached the link and he talked about it there also. So I looked in the minutes, he was talking about the $650 increase, which includes the phone support and the 3 days a week on site. So that's about a little over 6.5% increase since 2018. But that would also pick up all those different services as well.
You're correct, Brian. I don't know if this link is going to work, but I just dropped it in the group chat.
Yeah.
But that was on May 25th. We got that link.
Okay. That was before Gary sent his, because Gary's was later, I think. Right.
And I could be missing something. I'm just looking, quickly on the meeting.
Usually Chelsea sends those out, so I don't think I sent them out. I was looking at mine, but
It does, the hyperlink does work in the chat.
okay. Okay.
Where
And
was
that's
that?
the meeting he came to and was discussing the $650 increase. And he also spelled it out in his Brian's email too. He spelled all those different details and all that in his email before Gary input.
It's probably a moot point anyway, but
Mhm.
I don't have an email with this. I don't know where you got that, Andrew. I don't recall getting an email with this link included. Maybe I just missed it somehow.
Yeah,
Well, I'm searching quickly, so I will clarify after the meeting.
Yeah. let's do that.
Well, I mean, we're talking around this issue and I don't want, it's not up to me to belabor this. You know my opinion. I don't know how you want to proceed with this. Normally, the committee decides whether to move it forward to committee of the whole. I'm one out of 3 people on the committee and I'm saying no. Maybe just take a voice vote with the other 2, and if it goes forward, fine.
Thank you.
And I'm okay with moving it forward.
I think we're missing Paul.
There, I muted myself temporarily. Well, I gave this some more thought. And what I believe is when things come up in the future, they should be bid out and have things well in advance. So from the other comments that I have heard, I think this could go forward for next week.
All right. We will move it forward. Does anyone else have any questions or anything to add? Gary, do you have anything to add? You don't get to join us that often, so.
No, I mean, I'm still available for other questions if you had any. To Mr. Kerrison's point, I agree. Sometimes you feel like you're handcuffed to a vendor. It's not always a position you want to be in. And I do respect your position on this. I agree. Sometimes you really, how do you know you're paying the best price? I understand. And it's a tough body of work again, if it wasn't at the last minute, it would probably be easier to seek those out. I think trying to get that done in 30 days is a body of work, and not that I'm saying salespeople they hate being quote monkeys. That part is true, especially if they have the feeling that they're just spinning the wheels for an agreement they're not going to get. So it may be tough, but that said, your point's valid and taken, and I think going forward, as you see other contracts, I think your position has been well made that we should be looking for additional pricing on these.
Thanks.
Brian, do you have anything?
No, I mean, it's just a matter of how we want to go forward. There's not a requirement. It's, I don't know how this went down in 2018. I wasn't here. It sounds like it was pretty rough. So, I can't judge. I just know based on the increases in the services they provided to us since I've been here, I don't think it's worthy of a quote if it was bid out correctly then, but if it wasn't, then maybe it's time to fix that. I don't know. I mean, if that's the way the committee wants to go.
Well, the committee's already decided it's being moved forward, so we don't have to debate that part of it anymore.
Yeah.
We can talk about it more at the committee of the whole. I apologize if I've kind of, monopolized this conversation, but I just feel like sometimes, certain things have to be said. At least that's the way I feel about it. But I think I'm ready to put a pin in this and move on. Let's not belabor it if we've already got a plan in place.
All right. Well, then I will end our, I don't think we have anything else on the agenda. So I'm going to end our information systems meeting at 6:11 p.m. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later.
Thank you, Gary, for coming.
Yep.
Appreciate
Enjoy your
it.
vacation.
Thanks.
All right, at 6:12, I will call the Streets and Sidewalks Committee meeting to order. One item on the for discussion tonight, and that's the paving of South Freedom Street. Looks like Mr. Finney got the results back from the survey that was sent out. Did everybody have a chance to see that survey, or do we need to kind of go over it again?
I did email later today before I left work. I emailed the survey from Pat, and then I also emailed the options again just for your convenience.
Bob, did anybody respond with a complete, out of the 7 people that responded, or 5 people that, 7, did any of them have a total opposition to doing anything? They just wanted to leave it as is? Or did all the responses have at least an option picked?
21, as the memo states, 21 surveys were mailed out. We received 7 total, either email or written. 5 preferred option A, which was a complete new brick street. 2 of them preferred option B, which is asphalt with the, asphalt with the brick crosswalks.
Right.
Those were the 5. Those were the only ones we received. We did not receive anybody wanting to leave it as brick.
They wanted it brick, but
leave it
they
as
wanted new brick.
The 7 that responded wanted the road repaired. We did not receive any feedback to leave the street as it is.
Okay. And if we did take this to committee as a project, when do you think this would be able to be put on the agenda? What year? You think this is a next summer project?
Yes, our intent would be to include it in the paving program for 2022. And Tim Calfee and I spoke, I believe he's on vacation. He wanted me to bring it forward, to keep discussing it, so we could budget for next year's program.
Hey, Kay, if I could jump in real quick. I think if you mute your desktop, that should help with the echo.
Oh, whew. Thank you.
So the further Tim and I talked, seeing that majority of the residents had no feedback, and the fact that we're attempting to pave as many streets as we can with the paving levy, this would be taken out of the paving levy.
Mm-hmm.
We believe at this point, the intent would be to resurface asphalt over the brick and place concrete crosswalks at the intersections. At Main and Riddle, there would be just the one crosswalk at each, but the other 2 intersections, Spruce and Maple Lane, would have 4 brick crosswalks placed.
So Bob,
Asphalt street, brick crosswalks.
okay, I just questioned. So the survey though said the people wanted the brick, the ones who returned it, wanted to keep the brick, correct?
5
were A.
of the
and 2
7, correct. 5 out of 21 stated they wanted to keep the brick. And
So,
then 2 out of 21 said asphalt, brick
So
crosswalks.
okay, and you're saying that we would not do what the survey said, we would do the opposite? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the 14 of the residents had no response, thus it's inferred they have no preference.
Mhm.
Well, we can't really assume that. I know we've, you did,
Well,
you
do
did
you
your
have-
diligence, but
Yeah.
maybe.
What's our
to
other
go-
option?
Well, I'm just saying though, if 5 of the people sent it back and said they wanted to keep it, out of the 7 you received, I just guess why we wouldn't, be doing our best to try to save more of the brick. Because once that, I have had 2 people approach me that, said, that brick is, that's, once we pave over it, it's done. That
Mhm.
is historic.
Sure.
It's actually stronger is what they say than the asphalt road. I don't know. I guess that kind of, bothers me a little bit that, we wouldn't try to save that road a little bit more, and what the people that did take the time to respond to say.
What is the cost difference, Bob, between keeping it brick?
There is a difference.
Well, yeah, I know
About
there's.
120,000
Mhm.
from redoing the brick to asphalt, brick sidewalks.
I mean, I think we have to also financially feasibly look at it and look at the cost. I mean,
There's no other, historic grants that would help, because the bricks are considered historic, to offset the cost. I don't know if there's any type of, funding, that might, help to offset that. I do understand the difference of the cost and it is a lot, but it's just, I don't know, then why did we even send out surveys to the residents? If we knew that it was going to be a cost anyways, why would we even
people that
send
wanna-
out send out?
A lot of the people over the years that I have heard from and talked to that want to keep the brick road are not the ones that live down there and not the ones driving it every day. A lot of the people that live down there don't like the wear and tear that it does on their vehicles. So if there's 21 residents that live down there and 7 sent back, that's only a third. It's not even 50%.
Well, it doesn't matter anyway, Cheryl, because if it's a cost issue, I don't understand what the surveys or what the people say, because it's not going to make a difference.
It's a combination of things. It's not just the cost, but we have the surveys and we obviously see that only a third cared to return the responses. So unless we want to go door to door and knock on the other doors and ask them individually to fill out the survey so we can have all 21 residents' opinions, we have to assume that the ones that didn't return them don't have a preference.
And
Or they didn't
unfortunately,
get
the
'em.
people that did respond are probably the people that value the historic nature of that road. Not
Mhm.
everybody in this community values the historic aspect of things. So they're not going to respond because it doesn't matter to them. But it does matter to the ones that spoke up.
Yep.
So just because people didn't answer, it doesn't justify not listening to the people that did, in my opinion.
I agree.
And it was many years ago. That's why the street is kept brick, because a lot of the residents, I don't know the close percentage, when it was going to be completely resurfaced, asphalt over and everything, a lot of the residents, like I say, I don't know exactly how many, now it was a long time ago, they voiced their beliefs. They said, this is historic. We want brick relayed. So what happened? All the brick was taken up, relayed nice and smooth. Well, of course, it had a contour to it. And that was done throughout the street because they had spoken. And then this is the result right now. All the brick is there because of the residents' comments many years ago. And I do remember of that in progress.
Do we have documented complaints from residents about that road, Bob or Kay?
I don't have documented correspondence from the residents. We get complaints all day long. It would be inundating to log complaints, be it trash, potholes, that sort of thing.
So, okay, undocumented complaints. How many
Yeah.
calls a year, a day do we receive? I mean, is it overwhelming? I mean, is it noticeable?
No, we might get 5 to 10 a year, if that. I think Mr. Calfee's been the loudest vocal complainer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Me personally, I like the road. Sometimes I go out of my way just to go down that road. But I have a different outlook on this community than other people. So, but yeah, I value those bricks. I value that road, and I do not want to see it just paved over. If we can find a way to avoid that, I think we should, in my opinion.
And Bob, if I could jump in real quick and ask a question. Do you know that existing concrete below the brick? Do you know what that looks like, or what?
no, we know how thick it is, but we won't know how fragile it is until we possibly tear it up and see what it looks like. I mean, that's something that we could try to do this summer. I know the street department is understaffed, and they've been understaffed for quite some time, so we can't rely on them at this point. But we could make repairs to the road in sections, like we did Prospect Street, North Prospect Street, when we did the water line. We bid as part of that water line project to fix sections of the brick. And one of the issues that we found, we could save a lot of those brick. Prospect Street, North Prospect Street does not get the traffic that this section of Freedom does. It's also in better condition overall than this section of South Freedom. If we're going to make repairs to certain sections, we can repair the worst sections, but there's still going to be sections that are not very good shape. If we try to remove these bricks, we're not optimistic that they're not already crumbled or cracked. And we won't know that until we start removing them. There's no real easy way to remove it. It's not like working with pavers, landscape pavers in your sidewalk or your yard. They're heavy, but not heavy like that. They've kind of locked in. Sometimes they've been tarred. They would pour the concrete, lay a layer of tar, and set the bricks down on top of the tar. So sometimes they're kind of stuck. We won't know it until we start tearing the road apart.
Well, I do know the bricks on Prospect Street, North Prospect, was it? That when we had that repair a while back, it was, I can't remember, it was like with the water lines, but in the bid process, they were able to take the bricks with them because those bricks are worth money, correct?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, these are an oddball sized brick.
Okay, I just remembered, that they were able to take the bricks away. The contractor that we had, who we had a lot of issues with, and in return, then they were selling our bricks. So that's something too that I want to make sure doesn't, if they're worth money and we do get rid of some bricks, I don't know. I just think maybe bid that a little differently.
Well, we did that water line on North Prospect. Weren't the residents pretty adamant that it remained brick at that time as well?
I believe so.
I believe so. Yeah, I mean, ultimately we would like to keep this as a brick street, and we will do that if City Council decides to spend the additional money to keep it brick. And so that, in essence, that's our discussion today. Do we plan to keep the street brick as it is? And then Pat and I will figure out how to make this project work. If we have to split it over 2 years and spread the cost, we have the 2 large projects next year also, not only our paving project, but coming out of our annual paving levy, we have Riddle Avenue and South Chestnut Street, which is close to $250,000 between the 2 of them. So we would normally spend about we have $900,000 for paving. We're already taking $250,000 of that out to go to Riddle and Chestnut Street. We throw this project in, if we took $300,000 out of this project, out of our paving budget for this project, now we have a citywide paving program of $400,000. So that's why we want to discuss it a little further. We don't need an answer tonight. Tim Calfee doesn't want to forget about it. So he wants to continue moving this forward. I do believe by this fall, we need an answer. I would say no later than September, October, so Pat and I can start figuring out how to make this work. Again, knowing what projects we have coming up next year.
And I agree. I think we had some years that we had $3,000 or $4,000 worth of coal patch was our paving program. So I think we could still make some good things happen, but we will keep it on the front burner. Does anybody else have anything to add at this time?
I'll just say that there have been comments from some people, some residents over the years that the only reason they don't like the brick is because the street is start to move when the bricks start to move because of freezing and thawing. But that's the only drawback that I have heard from residents pertaining to the brick.
Okay. Thank you.
When the project was done before, going back what Bob had mentioned, that once the brick has been removed, then it has to be analyzed how many can be taken away.
Thanks.
Those were all
any other comments? Doesn't look like that. So, at 6:29, I will adjourn the Streets and Sidewalks Committee meeting. Thank you. Okay, at 6:29, I will convene the Planning Committee meeting. The only item on the agenda has to do with our procedures during our regular meetings to approve ordinances. And Chelsea sent out the wording in the charter that governs the requirement for 3 readings and how emergency clauses are handled. So, Andrew, you're the one who kind of asked to have this on the agenda. My feeling is there isn't much we can do to alter how we address those 2 issues unless we want to change some practices. I'll let you take over in a second, but briefly, I think one thing we could consider is not having so many emergency clauses. I mean, the only thing that emergency clause does is enact whatever ordinance is on the table right away instead of 30 days later. And I don't know that all our ordinances need that attention that quickly. It might be a bookkeeping nightmare to remember what's effective when, but we could save ourselves a little bit of time when we vote on these things if we ask people when they send in their ordinances not to include an emergency clause, unless guess what? It's an emergency. I mean, is everything if everything is an emergency, then nothing is an emergency, right? Anyway, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, and we'll have to go back to Paul's utility committee meeting too.
did I
I don't want
miss
to forget
that?
that. That's all right. Well, we can talk about this real quick. But you kind of took the words out of my mouth already that I've heard from you and Mr. Calfee on this issue, and I think we saw it in display at the last meeting on one of the property transfers in terms of voting against the emergency clause, but moving it on. That was one of my top concerns, Rob. What you just said is to make sure that our clerk of council isn't inundated with, and we aren't either. You know, our meetings are not dragging on longer than they should. I understand that we would only have one thing to vote on, but it was kind of throwing it out to council for further discussion to see if that is something, well, and to be determined, I guess, for a regular council meeting next month. But just, I guess, further discussion, if it's something, just what you said, not worthy of the emergency clause, we could leave it there and move it on for the next month's meeting, but with the caveat that we don't want things to pile up either and not get moved on. So I just wanted to throw it out there after we heard back from multiple
I
members.
guess the only question I have about the emergency clause is, if it's in there, do we have to vote on it? Because, you know, deciding not to enact it may still require a vote. So, I guess what I'm suggesting is it a better practice just to not include it in the ordinance?
Mhm.
Well, who's going to decide if it's an emergency clause or not? I mean, is that up to the department head or is that up to council? I mean, you know, when we say this, you know, who's going to monitor whether we think it's an emergency? If they submit it with an emergency, who's going to be the one who's going to decide that?
Well, I think if you read every ordinance that's on the agenda, at the end, it'll say whether there's an emergency clause. And that's my
Right.
question. You know, who decides is whoever drafts the ordinance. I don't know if that's our clerk or.
The track,
Oh, yeah, the
I'm-
tracking sheet will, yeah.
the tracking
Right, the
sheet,
tracking
so the
sheet's
department
originally-
heads that fill out the tracking sheet. Go ahead.
So I'm just worried,
The-
you know, how long the things are gonna, you know, some things are gonna take to get done. I mean, you know, sometimes in the city, you know, things will come up and they do require emergency clause because of, you know, change of personnel, change of what other, you know, equipment could break, you know, something could happen. And it's like, I don't want something drug out for 3 months that, you know, that needs fixed now. And then, you know, the department head may, you know, say, hey, I need to get this done. But then, you know, our council member is going to say, well, this is an emergency clause. I'm not gonna, no, this needs to be you know, an emergency clause. I mean, this needs to be 3 readings.
Well, those are two different things, Amy. That's one thing we have to make sure we understand. The 3 readings and the emergency clause are 2 different things. But for example, I'm looking at the agenda from our last meeting. The first thing has to do with dispatchers. Why is that an emergency? I mean, it's probably going to take them 30 days just to hire.
Well,
people.
because they needed to get those people hired because of the overtime and to cover vacations and stuff. We can't not have, you know, people trained. That needed to be an emergency.
Perhaps. I'm just saying it would probably take 30 days to hire them anyway. But look, sometimes
Let me add,
we
let me
get
add
like
real quick.
emergency
So
clause
there's
for something that
2
goes out.
components.
Sorry, Bob. Go ahead.
That's all right. There's 2 components to the emergency clause. One is waiving the 3 readings. The other is the emergency clause. What's that? Rob?
They're two different things. We vote on an emergency clause if it's included in the ordinance. And then we
Right.
vote to waive the 3 readings. Those are 2 separate things that are required in the charter.
Correct. And
They're
I
not the same
view
thing.
them as going hand in hand. If a department head asks for an emergency clause, we're asking to waive the 3 readings at the same time. You wouldn't go 3 readings, in essence, 3 months, and then not ask for an emergency. I mean, so I've asked, well, how do you say this? On the tracking sheet, it doesn't ask to waive 3 readings. but I've stated non-emergency. The 3 readings got waived, it got passed, and then it had to sit 30 days before it actually became an ordinance. This is what I've been told over the years. And then I've also seen when we modify chapter 12, it gets read 3 times. And nobody's been able to tell me why chapter 12 got read 3 times, but other chapters haven't. So I think, well, I don't know, I have suspicions, but across the board is our charter, which is the way it's supposed to be, our ordinances, that's the way it's supposed to be, that's fair. I also think it's fair for council to ask the department head, is this emergency and why? On our tracking sheet, it asks, why is this emergency? Because we want to begin construction as soon as possible. We want to lock into prices, that sort of thing. But I agree, there are a lot of things that get passed as emergency and read 3 and skipped reading 3 times. It's really not an emergency. So anyway, that's the way I view it. If I'm going to ask for an emergency, I'm going to want the ordinances, I'm going to want 3 readings waived.
Well, but they are 2 different things. And one thing
I understand that, right.
The thing that distinguishes the emergency clause is we don't vote on it unless it's included in the ordinance. So that's why it's in the tracking sheet. You can't, you can, I suppose, somehow informally request waiving the readings, but that's something that happens at the meeting by council. You can't, that's why it's not in the tracking sheet. And I get your point about time. They both have to do with timing, but one has to do with when we actually vote on it, which is waiving the 3 readings. That means we're going to vote on it tonight. The emergency clause says, when does it take effect? Now, of course, it can't take effect unless we vote on it. So it's the chicken and the egg kind of thing. But I mean, I think what Andrew is trying to do is how can we make our meetings a little bit more efficient? And one way is to dispense with the emergency clause when it's not truly an emergency. You know, a donation, you know, doesn't have to be done right away. You know, someone sends us a check and we'll deposit it. I'm sure it gets deposited anyway sooner. So it's somewhat of a moot point for some of the things we do. But if we can dispense with the emergency clause, then at least we could speed up our meetings a little bit. The 3 readings is an interesting thing too, because there's a lot of things that probably don't need to be waived. And we could set, but then, you know, it becomes one of those practices. What is council used to doing? And what is the rest of the city? You know, you submit a tracking sheet. Why do you have to wait 3 months? So it's going to be hard to break those practices, but I think that's what this discussion is about. And I don't think anything's going to happen right away. There's no action on the table tonight. It's just to open the door and maybe, because sometimes we don't think about that, right? We just do things the way we've always done them because that's the way we've always done it. And maybe sometimes we need to bring it up and say, maybe we shouldn't have to do it that way all the time. So maybe just food for thought. If anybody else has any other comments.
When an ordinance is read 3 times, can an ordinance be read at a committee meeting and count as one of the 3 readings? Can it be read at the committee of the whole and be considered? It can only be read at council. Is that correct?
Yes. I suppose, you know, it says 3 separate meetings. I suppose it could be a special meeting.
But it would
But I
have to be a
think
regular
that-
council meeting.
It doesn't say regular.
Well, I will, since we've struck up this
We
conversation,
held-
we'll keep it going with the law director, because I'm going to ask him about, I believe what he said on the 30 days was that if it's passed, he doesn't want to, they wanted to make sure it wasn't going to end up back on the agenda within that time, if you changed your mind or something. Or if something else came up, there was the reason for the 30 days part. I know we briefly talked about it, but I can ask him if we'd like to about those separate meetings.
Yeah, and as a department head and part of the administration, we just need to know so we can maybe plan a little better, plan a little further out. for this to take place. And we'll make it work.
And it could be a process where, like, say at the committee of the whole, we can make a judgment on it. Yeah, well, we want this to be an ordinance, but we don't want an emergency clause, or, you know what I'm saying? Just to give an indication before it comes to the meeting itself for a vote.
Well, that's the key word, before. So. But you're right, it does say on the tracking sheet, so I appreciate that, Bob.
Any other comments about this discussion?
I do agree with you, Rob, that not everything is should be deemed an emergency and should follow the 3 reading rule. I think we do need to develop more consistency on that. Although there are things that do come up that's an emergency. There's an appropriation that needs done right away, or a grant deadline where we, need to give approval for the mayor to sign an application or something like that. But I think it's specific to the situation. And, I've heard a lot of complaints and a lot of concerns with things getting dropped on us last minute. Why didn't we get this sooner? Why didn't we know about it sooner? And I think if we require the 3 readings as a standard and only do an exception for true emergencies, it will eliminate a lot of that last minute dropping on our plates, because it'll get everybody kind of thinking in advance. Gee, if I need this to get approved by council and it's got to go through 3 readings, I need to get this in now.
Good points. Anybody else?
Yeah, so those are a lot of positive comments, and I'll agree with that. And it will force a lot more discernment in getting things to council a lot earlier. And I've heard the same comments. Sometimes things forced to be an emergency where I see some things have to be, but some things aren't necessary that can be analyzed farther and gone toward the 3 meetings. Certain things are. So those are some real good, excellent pluses.
Okay. With that being the only thing on the agenda, well, is there a management update? I know the mayor's not with us tonight. Anybody else in the administration have an update on the planning committee?
I mean,
Not
I haven't
hearing
heard anything
anything,
personally.
Thanks, Brian. Then I will adjourn at 6:45 the planning committee, with my apologies, Paul, for skipping ahead.
No, you're fine with that, because everything will get done in the appropriated time. So one thing out of order isn't drastic. At 6:45, we'll start the utility meeting. There's one thing on the agenda. That's the water line project on Hillcrest, Zeta, and Spruce. And actually, I don't want to say this is an emergency, because it actually is. There's a big reason. One big reason I've found out that I was told, because of COVID, there's a tremendous amount of building products that have tremendously shot up in price. The only reason I'm saying that, I believe this should be okayed, started soon, before more price hikes go into effect. I've already found out that a lot of these price hikes, you don't get a notice. And a lot of these companies don't get a notice. They just come instantly from the manufacturers. And this is not just for this, but it's going to improve water pressure in certain areas. New hydrants will be installed. So those are going to be some drastic, critical things. Hopefully the hydrants won't need to be used, but new hydrants will be critical, especially pertaining to the fire department. Okay, that's all that I'll have to explain to this. The appropriations are listed. And there's a grant for this. And there's a loan for the difference, which isn't much. The grant's $236,900 for this. And this will be started later this year if everything is voted yes. So are there any questions or comments pertaining to these water lines? If not,
With this,
Yeah.
with this, on the tails of our previous discussion, the engineering department is requesting a special council meeting next Monday night. Perfect timing.
okay,
So we can have an ordinance, even though we can't sign a contract until July, but the contractor would feel confident at that point to order materials before the price hike. The contractor that we chose was $30,000, I believe, cheaper than the next low bidder. We had very competitive prices this year. You know, and it would be good for us to, if council's willing, it'd be good for us to work with this contractor in this regard. If they could save a few $1,000s, being able to order material sooner than later, we'll both benefit from it.
Bob, who is a contractor?
Contractors Utility Contracting out of the Youngstown area. We've worked with them multiple times over the years, just not within the last couple of years.
Oh, I see that now. Thank you.
are there any other comments from any other council members toward this project?
I'm good with it. I'm okay with having a special meeting if we need to.
Yes. If there are no other comments, this utility committee meeting will be adjourned at 6:49.
And I'll bring the Community and Economic Development Committee to order at 6:49. We just have further discussion on the proposed ordinance 2021-056 for the CRA expansions. Bob and Dennis are both here. Do you guys want to speak?
A portion of this was brought before committee before, asking for the expansion of the mapping and approval of the expansion of the downtown theater to extend westward in order to encompass a portion of Sycamore. For that fact, we have a developer who is looking at purchasing a vacated industrial building and wants to redevelop it as a mixed-use project. So we decided to move forward with an expansion of the current CRA so that the developer would be, we wouldn't lose the developer wanting to purchase this building. We've been in conversations with this project, and there was some issues regarding trying to encompass for the tax abatement. If we weren't able to get it in on time, we would probably have lost the developer. Now that we are moving forward with this, the developer has agreed to move forward with the purchase of the building. They will probably invest about $1 to 1.5 million into the building. We already have an assessed value from the auditor site, and all the information on the savings from the tax abatement has been carried over to the developer, at which he has agreed to move forward. what we did was we have been in talks with the lawyer from Bricker and Eckler, Jeff Harris. Jeff worked with the Ohio Development Services Agency, and he helped them create the State of Ohio CRA. That's why we decided to contract with Jeff, because he knows all the laws regarding the CRA, how they're set up, and what the conversations that we've had with Jeff have led us to, on the current theater CRA, to amend that and count that as what's called the CRA number 1. So what we've done was we have, as not to, if we change the amendment now, we would probably have to change the amendment or change the ordinance, the contract, to the theater CRA. So we decided not to do that. So what we're asking is to amend the current ordinance of 2016-088 as an amendment to the ordinance. You should have received a couple of documents from Chelsea. One would have been the original ordinance number 2016-088. That's the original. And then you would have received a second one with highlighted sections showing where we took the original and rewrote some of the verbiage inside of that ordinance, stating that this is now an amended ordinance and it will be called CRA number 1 here out. So some of the sections that were changed were sections 1 and sections 2 to clarify that this is CRA number 1. And then section 4, you will see was in the current ordinance twice. So I removed that, I struck that out. And then at the bottom of section 5, there was a section stating to administer and implement the provisions of this ordinance. The finance director of the city of Ravenna is designated as the housing officer described as 3735.65 through 3735.70. That has been changed to administer and implement the provisions of this ordinance. The economic development director of the city of Ravenna is designated as the housing officer. All other changes past that were, because section 4 was in twice, all I did was move all the numbers up 1. So you will see that it now stops at section 11 instead of section 12. So that is the changes that were made. And we will be looking at a CRA number 2 later this year that will encompass the areas surrounding CRA number 1 and the rest of Ravenna. Bob, do you have anything?
No, you did a fine job. Dennis, Cheryl, and I worked on this last week and got our ducks in a row to be able to present it to you in a orderly fashion, and I think we did. I did speak to the developer. Today. He is set to close on his property on Wednesday, I believe, as long as there's no hiccups. There's been a lot of hiccups he's come across through this process with this particular property.
Cheryl, do you have anything to add?
No, just that I'm really excited to see this move forward, and excited to see when we get the CRA 2 done, and thank Bob and Dennis very, very much. I know you guys put a lot of time into this last week, and then
Well,
spent Friday with me.
This is important to the city
It is.
to help attract development, future development, as well as to help remodel some of the areas, some of the structures. And it just it provides a tax incentive that we don't have grants and things like that available. It provides a different avenue for some of these property owners to look at and take advantage of. With that said, Riddle 9 was approved by City Council. It has been sent to the school district for the board review. And after that, then it will go down to the Ohio Development Services Agency for the review and approval. And if we move forward with amending this contract, we will be able to have the developer for the building on Sycamore to take advantage of this. And with me not being in the office, I wished I had the drawings available right now to be able to show you guys the plans that they have, that he has for the building. It's going to be a wonderful change to that area, and it will encompass 3 different concepts. There will be a housing, residential housing that will be, he's going to develop into condos. You'll have a commercial side, and then on the back side, on the lower section, he will place retail at the bottom with a concrete patio for outdoor seating. So it's a great concept. It'll be a great addition to the downtown, and we look forward to hopefully having more developers after Riddle 9 and after the Sycamore building coming in and wanting to take part of the redevelopment of downtown.
Ask real quick, Dennis, it's good seeing you first, but are those, just a random question, are those pictures available digitally, or is that something somebody might be able to send around to council, or no?
I don't have them digitally. They had drawn them out on large,
They're very large renderings.
yeah, very large renderings. They're in my office. So if you're ever over there and you want to take snapshots, go ahead. We're allowed to pass them around, just not through publicly. They have to stay within the city hall and within council.
Well, maybe we'll display them here, and if council members want to see it, they can come in. We'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's perfect. Any other questions?
Great seeing you, Dennis.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Anyone else have anything? Nothing else? We'll adjourn at 6:59.
And that's the last agenda, so see you